Denim is in demand at Plato's Closet in West Ashley and North Charleston. Get cash on the spot for everything denim. Bring in your trendy and classic styles of gently used name brand denim. Get paid for your denim shorts, skirts, jackets, jeans, and more. We're looking for denim that is blue, black, or a bold color, and jeans in styles like mom jeans, bootcut, baggy, flared, and ripped. We want everything denim. Sell your denim for cash at Plato's Closet today. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
The Agile brand.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast, now part of the Agile Brand Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I am so glad you're here. I empower leaders to delight their customers, and I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights, wisdom, and practical tips that you can use immediately. I'm also excited to announce the Trusted Guide Roadmap Masterclass for CX leaders who struggle with executive buy-in and are ready to go beyond CX fundamentals. The Masterclass gives you proven frameworks and takes you step by step through a 4-step model that will move you past the frustration of not getting your work done. It's unique because it's live, interpersonal, hands-on, and we give you tools and templates to help you build your CX roadmap. To learn more, visit empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. And now on to the show. Well, today's episode is going to be a little bit different than a typical episode, not because we're not going to talk about customer experience, but it's the nature of the guest that we have on the show today who has a little bit of a different background. And I'm so excited. We're going to talk about her best-selling book. It's called Superfans, How to Turn Your Customers into Lifelong Advocates, which is, by the way, sold tens of thousands of copies in the United States. It's been translated into multiple languages. It won the 2023 Outstanding Works of Literature Award for Sales and Marketing, Book of the Year. But what's really interesting about Brittany is, I think, going back to her roots as an entrepreneur, an entrepreneurial spirit. She launched her first company when she was 26, and within 18 months, she had released a dozen products in Walmart stores nationwide, combining for more than $10 million in sales. She has partners with brands including J&J, Kellogg's, Dr. Pepper, and superstar entertainers including, okay, get ready for this. You don't hear this on the Delighted Customers podcast every day, Katy Perry, Dolly Parton, Luke Bryan. And we're going to talk about this other person, Taylor something, at some point during this episode. She was named to 30 Under 30 and 40 Under 40 list by Billboard and Advertising Age, among others. And the list goes on. I'm just so excited to have you. You're going to tell us some other stories related, but welcome to the show, Brittany Hodak.
Thank you so much, Mark. I'm thrilled to be here hanging out with you today.
Absolutely. So I don't even know where to begin because your background is so incredibly fascinating. It's like an adventure in and of itself. But could you share a little bit with the audiences of kind of how the highlights of how you got to where you are and what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I think I was always entrepreneurial without knowing it. I didn't grow up with a lot of entrepreneurs in my family, so it wasn't ever something I thought about. I thought if you wanted to do big things, you went to work for big companies and, worked your way up. And I grew up not far away from Bentonville, Arkansas. And part of me always thought, like, maybe I'll work for Walmart one day. And after college, I moved to New York City. I was working for record labels. And through kind of a twist of fate, I ended up starting a company to work with Walmart. So I had been trying to get support for this idea that I had to launch this fan engagement arm of, at the time I thought it was going to be like a division of one of the major record labels to do really customized, like fan first merchandise products. Like, how do we take an album release and turn it into an event with these really cool collectibles that will make people want to go, buy the music and save it and share it with their friends and do all of these things. And I couldn't get much support inside any of the companies that I was working for. And finally, in a conversation with a buyer at Walmart, who I'd become friends with because I was doing all of these retail promotions at Walmart, first for Sony Music and then for another agency where I worked. And she said, "Why don't you just start your own company? I'll give you a vendor number. I know you're the one, driving this idea. You've been trying for years to get people to, get behind it. I'll just give you a vendor number." And I Googled while I was on the phone with her. Her name is Jenny. I Googled how to start a business and I was like, this doesn't sound too hard. I can probably figure it out. And, a lot more people take your phone call when you say, "Hey, I'm calling about this idea that Walmart wants you to get behind," rather than just like, "Hey, I'm 26 and don't know what I'm doing. Will you write me a check?"
Right.
So I was incredibly unfortunate to have Walmart say, "We'll support you if you can get this off the ground and if you can prove that this idea works. So we need to test the concept, we need to find success, and if we find success early on, then we'll be off to the races." And luckily at the time, my husband was the head of sales for the record label that put out all of the Kids Bop products. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kids Bop brand, but it's the largest kids music brand in the United States. So I went
Yeah.
home one day and I was like, "Babe, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start a company and you have to be my first customer." And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Don't worry. I've already got the idea pretty much worked out." Because, by this time it had been 2 or 3 hours since I had that phone call at my desk. And so I did it. I launched a company. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was lucky enough to be able to surround myself with really great, smart people who believed in the idea. And because every decision that I made was really driven by what is best for fans, what is best for artists, what is the right thing to do, we found a lot of success. And since I was doing all of this within the infrastructure of how do we sell more things at Walmart stores, I very quickly became ingrained to this consumer packaged goods world. What's good for brand managers, what's good for product managers, what is important for shopper marketing teams. So I was living in New York City at the time. I went back to school. I got a master's degree in consumer behavior and marketing, and I started to see all of these parallels. It was like, oh my gosh, selling Pop Tarts is exactly like selling Katy Perry CDs. Selling, Johnson and Johnson hair care products is exactly like trying to get somebody to join a fan club. It's all about connecting your story to a customer story, making someone want to choose whatever it is that you are at the exclusion of all of the other options available to them. And so I became laser focused on this idea of how can I spread this message? How can I teach people about not just the power of creating superfans, but the obligation that we all have to be able to go out and be the one best thing that you're best at to help people? Like, how do you go from just a commodity provider to a category of one for all of the people who need the unique skills and talents that you have? How do you go from, like a guy in a striped shirt and hat to Waldo? How do you become that Waldo and then tell the world that they need to find you?
Hmm. So you got to rewind a little for the audience because you told me this story. I almost didn't believe it about a mascot, right? So how did this evolve?
So I always knew I wanted to work in entertainment. I grew up in a really small town in Oklahoma, right outside of this town called Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I just was fascinated by the entertainment industry. And when I was a sophomore or junior in high school, I was 16. So whatever that equates to, I think I was a sophomore. I got to go spend an afternoon, what was called job shadowing. Like you got to pick a place that you would want to work and go spend an afternoon there. And I initially had wanted to do the TV station because that was on the list. And then they, for whatever reason, like couldn't do it. And they said, "But we're going to call a friend at the radio station," because somebody who had used to work at the TV station worked at the radio station. And I was like, that's so much better. That's what I wanted to do originally, but radio station wasn't on the list. So I spent the afternoon at this radio station, 20 minutes or whatever away from my high school. And I said, "Please hire me. Please, please, please. I'll take any job. I'll do anything." And the station manager said, "Well, you're about the right height for our mascot suit. How do you feel about being a mascot?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? That sounds like the best thing ever." So it became my job on weekends and holidays and after school to be Sting the Bee. I was the 6.5 or 7 foot tall bumblebee for our station B98. And I got to go to
Wow.
every, car dealership sale and ribbon cutting ceremony and rodeo in like a 50-mile radius. And it was so cool because we would be doing these remotes and whoever the station talent was would be broadcasting on the radio like, hey, we're here at the like Midtown post office, like it's tax day, everybody come out and like get a free CD and enter to win concert tickets and take your picture with the bee. And getting to be like the literal embodiment of the brand was so cool because I got to see how people of all ages, children, adults, like older people, just everybody who wanted to interact with the bee. It was like I was a celebrity, but, encased in anonymity. It was so cool.
Mm.
And it started me, I think, down this path of thinking not everyone wears a mascot costume, but everyone is the brand. Every single employee, the minute they put on a name tag, whether it's a literal one or a metaphorical one, to customers, that is the brand. And so that was a really cool thing to sort of get to witness, up close. But about 6 months after I started working at the radio station, and this was what you and I had talked about before that you were referencing, I had a really lucky break. My maiden name was Jones, and the station manager came in one day and said, I keep seeing ads on TV for something called Bridget Jones' Diary. It's some new movie that's coming out. And I just keep thinking, we have a Brittany Jones, so we should do something to take advantage of that. And now, mind you, no one outside of my friend group at high school knew that the station, quote, had a Brittany Jones. Like I was the mascot. That was all I did. But with all the kind of confidence of a teenager with nothing to lose, I was like, well, what if I just wrote articles for the station website and that was my diary? Like what happened when I hung out with this band or went to this show and, we could promote it on air. And my manager said, "Oh, like that other movie that's really buzzy right now, that Almost Famous movie. Yeah, that's like gonna get some Oscar buzz. We should do that. Just make a list of all the bands you want to see and we'll work everything out with the labels. And, don't forget to like record your time and your miles." And I was like, wait, what? So overnight, it became my job I think I had just turned 17. Um, Overnight, it was my job to hang out with rock stars and brag about it on the internet, which, spoiled, I think, probably any chances of me ever getting a traditional job. And also just sort of heightened this sense of what are what are the forces at work here? Why are some of these bands becoming the biggest stars in the world and
Mm.
others go away after one or two songs or they never even get their song? And I was working at a radio station, so I was looking through the lens of like a one-hit wonder versus like a sustained artist with lots and lots of hits again and again and again. And you know, I started to think about the variables. And at this time I was like, oh, I'm going to go work at a record label after college. So, I was like, it's not the money that's being spent by the label. It's not necessarily the promotional plan. It's not always the quality of the artist or the quality of the songs. And I started to see time and time again that the more engaged that an artist was with their fan base, the more engaged the fan base was with the artist. It was like a two-way street. Like, we
Mm.
care about you. Oh, I care about you too. And so these engaged fans, what they were doing was telling their friends. So the next time the band was back in Fort Smith, Arkansas, they were playing a much bigger venue because all of those same people were coming back, but they were bringing their friends now. And all of the people who had bought the album and loved the album and bought the t-shirts were doing it again. And so it was sort of growing, organically. And so I was like, why isn't everybody doing this? All of these artists who are like, oh, I don't have time to meet my fans, or oh, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, trying to have this air of mystery between themselves and the audience, they're just never connecting. They're that
Mm.
commodity. They're not like somebody that I see myself in and can connect my life to.
Yeah. So, Brittany, I think you're hitting on a point which you mentioned in the book. You give to get, right? But before we double tap on that, because I want you to tell us about the white space for the book and all that. But there was what I try and do for my audience, and sometimes the guests go through things really quick and they miss a key point and a gem. And I think you hit one. It's not necessarily customer experience related. It's more of a life lesson, which I'd like you to help me pull out. But this idea of the right place at the right time, this idea of following your passion, and you're a sting to be 1 minute, then all of a sudden you're writing a column following guests. And then, I have a friend who talks about increasing our luck surface area. But what's the lesson in all this craziness for you that you could share with the audience?
You know, I was reflecting a few months ago on like all the jobs that I've ever had.
Mm.
And so now I'm a keynote speaker and an author. I was running my own agency for several years. I worked at an advertising agency. I worked for 2 record labels. I had a lot of cool jobs in college. The only job in my life, and I'm now 40 years old, the only job that I've ever had that anyone had that position before me was the mascot. Every job since, including internships, was a job that I either helped envision or was able to step into to say, I know there's not a solid job description yet. I know this doesn't quite exist, but let's figure it out. So when you talk about increasing that surface area of luck, I think a lot of it is intuition and faith and the ability to help people see a vision that maybe doesn't exist yet. Because in every single job I've ever had, like a dozen jobs, including, I was the chief experience officer of a company called experience.com. Like everything from internships to C-level jobs was me saying, take a chance on me. And we're going to figure this out, and things are going to be better because we did. And I think so many people, they struggle if they can't see 5 steps ahead. But you don't always need to see 5 steps ahead. You just need to trust that like the steps will be there. And even if you can only see the next step in front of you, having the faith to say, well, I know the staircase continues to ascend, so I'm going to like take the next step, do the thing, and build the steps if I have to, is a really, really valuable tool for everyone. Whether you're looking for a new job or redesigning an experience for your customers or anything else. Just because it hasn't been there before doesn't mean it can't be there in the future.
Okay. All right. It's a great lesson, and your story is a fascinating one and different probably than most of our listeners would have, but the lessons, I think the lessons are common. So let's bridge this timeline gap here from writing and now meeting with some of these people who are more and more famous, and you're getting to write. Tell me how you got from there, like career wise, to then writing the book.
So I was starting to get asked more and more to help people understand the psychology of fandom, help people understand why what I was talking about was as important as something that they had been taught in business school or they could see on a dashboard that exists already in their company, and how customer experience was not the same thing as customer service. Customer experience is, it's a philosophy, it's an ethos that the entire company has to be on board with across every single seat, every single position in the company. And so I was getting asked to do a lot of contributing. Can you write an article about this? Can you come on this podcast and talk about this? Can you write a column for our magazine about this? And as I was doing that, it just became more and more apparent that I wanted to take everything that I believed and put it together in one place. And the really interesting thing about writing the book is, like, for years, people were like, do you have a book? Do you have a book? Are you putting a book out? Where's your book? Where's your book? And it took me so long to get it done because it felt very important to me that my book not feel like any other customer experience book or any other business book. And there are so many intentional decisions that I made with the book. Every chapter and every H1 heading in the book is a song title. The book is printed in 4 colors. There are a lot of really fun things that we do with like cadence and tone throughout the book so that as you're reading the book, of course you're absorbing the lessons, but also hopefully you're reflecting on like fun moments from your own past, from your own life, thinking about your own business through a different lens, maybe through this like entertainment lens that you haven't thought of before. And so that was really, really important for me. So the path to writing the book honestly was I was running this agency for several years, grew it up, grew it up. The valuation was higher and higher. Went on Shark Tank. That was a lot of fun. Got asked to go on Shark Tank, by the way. Had a producer call one day and say, "Hey, would love to have you on Shark Tank." After that, the visibility was so much higher. Like every time it would re-air, we just more and more like owners of sports teams and heads of Hollywood studios just calling and inquiring about being clients, but also hundreds of emails and calls from like regular businesses saying, "How do I work with you? I want this. I want super fans. I want to create super fans for my business. What can I do?" And so that really stretched me to think about like, okay, you have a car wash in your hometown. You make medical device supplies. Like, what can you do? And how do we take this model or what is a model that we can create that works regardless of industry, regardless of, product offering, regardless of size or age or location of business. And so that was what really pushed me down the path of like, okay, I've got to go figure this problem out because all of these people are asking me to solve this problem. And so that led me to delivering keynote speeches, to writing this book, to getting to, go on some of the stages that I get to go on, literal and metaphorical stages, to talk about this idea of treating your customers in a way that makes all of your competitors totally irrelevant, making them say, "I will continue to be loyal to you until you no longer exist," because honestly, I don't need to solve this problem again. I already solved it. Like I already have the best solution. Why would I ever look elsewhere unless you give me a reason to look elsewhere? So this idea of not just, closing a sale, but creating a super fan is something that I'm so incredibly passionate about.
Yeah, and I love that idea of getting customer loyalty and thinking about it in terms of what would make them not even think to look anywhere else. I want to ask you about some of the lessons you've learned from some of the clients you've worked with or written about in particular. And I know they found their way into the book, right? In terms of the stories that come out, but there's this one. I don't know. Some of you listening might have heard of this woman named Taylor Swift, something like that, and she has risen. She was a star in her, I guess, her teens, late teens, and but has like blossomed now that she's in her 30s. Like not even blossom, like unlike any other single artist that I can think of in history right now. It's nuts. And you had a chance to cover her. Tell us about that and tell us about what you learned, what you can share.
Yeah. So I met Taylor for the first time when she was 17. It was the night that she received her first ever televised award. And at a party after that award show, we were talking, and she was just starting to get written up in industry press for some of the things that she was doing on MySpace, which, if you like travel back in time in your mind to 2007, that's how a lot of people discovered new music, was on MySpace. And she was taking all of this time that she had when she was on tour buses, on the road, in the studio, waiting around, and she was connecting with like thousands of teenagers around the country. Not to say, "Hey, you should listen to my music," but to say, "I'm so sorry about that thing that happened to you today in math class," or, "Ugh, I hate it that you just broke up with your boyfriend. I know how much that sucks." She was connecting with people who were fans of artists that she admired or that she was, going on tour and opening for. And I asked her about this, and I will never forget what she said. She said, "I want this album to sell 1 million copies. And I know to get 1 million people to spend $10 to buy my record, I have to make them care about me, because they're not going to care about my music if they don't care about me." And so she was on a mission to show these people that she cared about them so that many of them, some of them, would then care about her and be curious enough about her as a person to care about her music. And I remember looking at my friend who was there with us, and I was like the smartest artist I've ever talked to, right? And at this point, I was, I think, 22. I had been working with and around artists for 5 or 6 years, and at the time was working for one of the largest record labels on the planet. And I just thought, this teenager has got it figured out more than people who have been in this industry for twice as long as she's been alive, right? And obviously, things have worked out really well for Taylor. But if you look at her career, in every single stage of her career, she has super served her fans. She has said, I care about you collectively. I care about you individually. There are thousands and thousands of stories that you can find online, and thousands more that aren't online, of Taylor doing things for individual fans. Whether it's like showing up at their wedding because she got an invitation, paying off, student loans and parking tickets and mortgages and just all of these things to show her fans that she cares. And because of this, her fans are fiercely loyal, fiercely protective, and love to initiate people into their world, right? Like, you meet a Swiftie and they're like, let me take you down the rabbit hole. Let me talk about, what I think is going to happen in the next album because of these Easter eggs that she's planted, or these things that I think might be Easter eggs that have been planted. And, if you look at 2023 alone, the sheer magnitude of the things that she has been able to achieve, records that didn't even exist before, like she's breaking her own records, because of the love that her fans feel. And while you might look at that and say, like, oh yeah, that's a one-off, like that's one person, it goes to show what's possible when you unfailingly put your fans first. And I think that the blueprint that she has written, I mean, in addition to the fact that she's very fan centric, she also is incredibly talented and one of the hardest working people ever. She's also a brilliant marketing mind, right? Like, I think she could be the CMO of any company and immediately improve the company because of the way she thinks about interacting with people in the world. And I think that it's not a huge step to say anyone anywhere could look at their business and say, how would Taylor handle this? Like, what would Taylor Swift do if I were like going to snap a button and have her appear next to me, like Genie style, and say, like, all right, Genie Taylor, how do I solve this problem? The creativity and intentionality that she would put into creating an experience for a customer is something that every business could emulate. Every business can learn something from.
Such an important lesson. It reminds me of a saying that Charlie Green, who wrote the Trusted Advisor book, said. He's got these 4 variables on which how to become trustworthy, and I think that's really important for a CX leader in particular, for a brand as well, as we're talking about brand loyalty. But the other thing he said was, aside from those 4 things, is in order to be trusted, you must first trust. That is a good way to become trusted, is to first trust other people. And it sounds like, she's giving, and by the way, in an authentic way, because you can tell that she means it when she, sits there and looks at 70,000 fans in Los Angeles, that she's not just doing it, she's soaking it in because she really does appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one of the things that I say over and over is super fans are created at the intersection of your story and every customer story. If you don't have that, like if your thing and their thing have not connected, you are just another commodity provider. You're just another potential solution in a sea of solutions. It's not until your story and theirs overlap in some way that you truly have someone who isn't just like showing an affinity for your solution, but is very likely to advocate on your behalf.
And so is that thought process around what you just said, is that you need to do more, listen more, understand their world more, et cetera, to get to the point where there is that overlap? B, you're sharing your story if they're not interested, maybe they're not the right fan for you, or see both of those?
It's both of those. So I talk about in the book this framework. It's called the super model, SUPER. Super is an acronym. Just very quickly, it's start with your story, understand your customer story, personalize, exceed expectations, and repeat. And that is the operating model that I advise all companies to have across the board, right? Whatever department you're in. And the reason start with your story comes first is because that really does have to be the foundation of everything else. Like, who are we? Not who are we this quarter, not who are we this week, this promotion, this holiday, but who are we? Because customers buy what you do, super fans buy who you are. These are people who say, I like you. And
Mm.
even if it means paying a little bit more, driving a little bit further, going out of my way a little bit, this is the solution for me. So that's the first part, is figuring it out. Start with your story. You understand your customer story is all about those things that you're talking about. The actively listening, having the true empathy that precedes the authority of understanding what your customers need, what they're about. Because the reality is, you're not going to be right for everybody. There are millions of people who cannot stand Taylor Swift for one reason or another. You think she cares a whole lot about that? Maybe as a human, maybe like her human emotions, she's like, I don't understand how somebody who's never met me can hate me. But as a brand, she's doing okay. She was able to become a billionaire and then some based on the people that she was right for. So, too often, brands and businesses aren't like super clear on who they're trying to target. So, they have these very basic, ignorable marketing messages that
Mm.
don't really
Mm.
appeal to anyone. And I always say the biggest threat to your business is not a lack of awareness. Plenty of people know who you are, they just don't care because you haven't given them a reason to. It's not a lack of awareness, it's the presence of apathy. And what you have to do to convert prospective customers into first time customers, and then first time customers into long time customers, and long time customers into super fans, is you've got to overpower that apathy. You've got to be so good that they can't wait to come back. And then, oh, by the way, they can't wait to tell their friends why their friends should check you out too. And again, that's exactly like what I was talking about on the music side, right? It's how do I make this so good that people want to come back and bring their friends? And I do not care what industry you're in. There is not a single product or service on this planet that cannot make more money and do a better job for your customers by looking at your business through the lens of over delivering on the customer experience. I do not care what you do. I had a gentleman who read my book probably a month ago now, and he reached out to me. He works in the funeral services industry. He's been in the funeral services industry for 40 years. And he said, I feel like you wrote this book for me. And
Hmm.
now I want to take what I learned and go out and teach everybody who works in the funeral services industry of what they need to do to turn every family member into a super fan. And I have lots of other like crazy examples of industries. Industrial concrete polishing. That's another one. I did not know industrial concrete polishing was a thing until a gentleman in Iowa who read my book told me how he couldn't wait to take the principles of creating superfans into his industrial concrete polishing business and have everyone on his team know that their job is to turn these like plant managers and hospital facilities operators who are choosing the concrete polisher to choose them and not their competitors.
There you go. And continue on with the personalize.
Yeah, so personalize, like I said, super fans are created where your story and your customer story overlap. In the P pillar of the supermodel, I talk about the need to have both high tech and high touch personalization, because when you think of it like a Venn diagram, when you have high tech and high touch, you create high impact. So the personalized pillar is about all of the things that you can do both on a like micro level and a macro level to make it easier to do business with you. I talk a lot about this idea of the platinum rule, which was first coined and introduced and for decades has been expounded on by a brilliant thinker. His name is Dr. Tony Alessandra. He talks a lot about customer experience. But the platinum rule is essentially one step up from the golden rule that we all learned and knew of. He says, don't treat others the way you want to be treated, treat others the way they want to be treated, because not everyone wants to be treated the way you would. And more importantly, not all of your customers want to be treated the same way as every other customer. So the personalized pillar is about all of the things that you can do to understand what it is that your customers want and need from you, and then to deliver it. And that leads right into the next pillar, which is E. E stands for exceed expectations. This is, if I'm being honest, probably my favorite part of the book, because I talk about this concept of intentional experience design, which is bringing a greater sense of intentionality to every single touch point. Like, what are the repeatable touch points that happen again and again in every sales cycle, in every customer journey, every time I'm onboarding a prospect, every time I'm onboarding an employee, like whatever it is. What are all of those moments? And how can you elevate them from neutral to positive? Like, how can you take it from ordinary to extraordinary or exceptional, and bringing the intentionality around not just saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if, but then building the systems and processes to make the new thing that you want to happen as easy and automatic as the old thing that you don't want to do anymore. And that's the fifth pillar. R, repeat, is all about, how you do that, like the systems, the processes, the automation.
Awesome. Awesome model. It makes sense on all these levels. And, those of us in the CX world who have been practitioners for a long time are thinking through all the frameworks and models and everything, but you've got it so succinct in the super model, pardon the pun.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just, I wish everyone understood how important CX is. And I think
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
when we look back at this phase in history for organizations, companies, the thing that people are going to say, I can't believe they kept on that way that long, is
Mm.
the over siloification, I think is the scientific word, the over siloification of roles and departments and people who are like specializing in this one thing without zooming out and having the generalized knowledge to understand what that means to their customer, like full circle, big picture. And I think CX in many organizations suffers because of that. And I hope that my little introduction to the field of CX with this idea of creating superfans helps people take a step back and think about the fact that everyone is in the experience department, and it is up to everyone at the organization to be the company, even if they're not wearing a mascot costume.
So two other things I want to hit on. Great message. One is going back to understand your story. You and I had talked previously, Brittany, about Taylor Swift and the incredible super fans, the incredible fan base that she has, and what kind of an influencer she has, and her awareness of that, and her going back to understanding your own. Start with. I'm sorry, that's what I meant to say. Understand. Start with your own story. Is she is selective as who she will sponsor, advertise for, be a spokesperson for where their products or whatever. And you can just imagine, no matter what, you from probably concrete polishing to car washes to mascot, they would all love to have Britney Spears be their sponsor promoting their product, but she doesn't. And so tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I think with Taylor, she has always understood the weight of her endorsement and what it
Mhm.
means to her fans, and a lot of young fans, especially if you look at, her career over the past 15 years, she's very oftentimes been appealing to peers and younger. And so understanding that for her to say, hey, I'm aligning with Diet Coke, means a whole lot of people who've never had Diet Coke are going to all of a sudden drink Diet Coke, right?
Mhm.
And so she's always been a very careful steward of her brand, which is not like, we don't see that same level of discernment from many celebrities, right? A lot of them, it's like, let me cash the check. Now, part of it has been that she's been in a privileged position to not have to cash those checks, right? Like from the very early days of her career, she's had success. I mean, she sold several million copies of her first album over a period of time, but I think she had gone double platinum in like 2 years or something. So she was in a privileged position, to be sure. But I think with brands, it's thinking about what you want to associate with, whether there's an
Mm.
exchange of cash or not. And one of the things that we see play out again and again and again in real time is brands who, like, on their social accounts, try to take a stance on something that's like a button social issue or political issue, or even just like a it's trending right now, I want to get on an issue, and then it doesn't age real well, right?
Mm.
Sometimes instantly, and sometimes when you look back at it. And so it's, again, it can feel a little, this is not a business word, but like in real life to a friend, I would say, like, it feels thirsty, right? Like it feels very much like, pick me, pay attention to me. I need your attention, because people are focused on the moment and not the big picture. They're focused on, like, how do I get likes on this photo, instead of how do I make people feel good about the decision that they've made to support and spend money with my brand.
Yeah, I think it is who you affiliate with is part of your brand, whether you like it or not. And that's a perception. If you stay true to yourself and get clear about, start with your story, as you say, the S is certainly will help in that regard. There's something in the book too. I'd like you to, if you don't mind sharing, pet sounds.
Yes.
So what is pet sounds?
Well, so in the book, I chose songs for every chapter, and that chapter of the book is about Chewy, which is, I think, one of the
Ah,
most brilliant examples of customer experience and using CX as a differentiator. And I tell the story of how I went from not even knowing Chewy was like an online pet food retailer to becoming a devout super fan. And
mm,
in the book, I walk through not just the decisions that Chewy has made, and not just like the people side and the process side, but how businesses can learn from that and model from that, whether they're small, mid-sized, or giant. And it's called Pet Sounds. Obviously, the famous album and song by the Beach Boys. The Beach Boys were one of the clients that I had the opportunity to work with on multiple occasions, and they're just wonderful, right? They're just incredible legends, and so that was a fun nod to that. I think I do share one, like, quick Beach Boys story in the book. It's not in the Pet Sounds chapter, and there's not a lot about it, but there are some CX lessons that you can take from the Beach Boys too.
awesome, awesome. All right. So love this inside scoop here you're sharing about the book and the stories and many more inside stories in the book, no doubt. Before we say goodbye, last question I ask all my guests is, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self?
I love this question. The advice that I would give to my 20-year-old self is take the risk.
Hmm.
I can't think of a single time that I've regretted taking the risk. There are times that those risks have blown up spectacularly, like spectacularly. But I've always learned something, and I've always come out the other side glad that I took that risk, and better for learning what I learned, even if I got a couple battle scars on the way. So my advice is keep taking the risks that you take even more of the ones that you thought about and didn't do, both to my 20-year-old self and anyone else out there who finds themselves being 20 or perhaps even 20 plus.
Great message. Great message. It certainly worked out well for you. Hey, if people would like to get a hold of you, what would be the best way?
Well, you are free to reach out to me at brittanyhodak.com. And because I was blessed with a great SEO name when I married my husband, I really upgraded in the SEO department from Jones to Hodak. Pretty much anywhere you see a Brittany Hodak, that's me. I'm at Brittany Hodak on all of your favorite socials. You can get me at brittany@brittanyhodak.com if you want to send me an email. But would love to hear about any of your thoughts on customer experience or creating superfans. And of course, the book is available everywhere books are sold, including as an audiobook that I narrate.
And it's super fans. And I said the tagline I gave before is was not your tagline for the book.
No, it
So
absolutely is. It's creating superfans, how to turn your customers into lifelong advocates.
okay, all right. Want to make sure I get that right.
You got it exactly right. But if you search for creating superfans, you're going to find it.
Creating super fans. Brittany, fascinating book. You're going to want to pick it up. She doesn't lie about the creativity and the colorful fun read that it is, but yet an important message about customer experience. So unique. And if you're looking for a speaker to talk about the topic and get your people pumped up about CX, she's the one. Brittany, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for saying that, Mark, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up and a lot of other great content. I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those at my website at empoweredcx.com. That's EMPOWEREDCX.com. Also, make sure to check out the other shows in the Agile Brand Podcast Network by going to www.agilebrandguide.com. The Delighted Customers podcast with Mark Slayton is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content.
The Agile Brand.